Development. The Minister appearing is the Minister for Education. Estimate of payments, Department of Education $3,365,421,000 and ministered items for the Department of Education $325 million and $325,068,000. I declare the proposed payments open for examination and refer members to the agency statements volume 1. The member for Wright has been discharged and the member for Raynell is joining us. Welcome, member. Minister, could you please update your advisers for the committee?
I'm happy to do so. We've been joined at the head table by Karen Weston, who is the Acting Executive Director for Early Years and Child Development. Behind us is Kashama Brandon, who is the Director of Early Childhood Services, Department for Education, and Carmine Viteri, for the Director of Budget and Finance, and Julianne Reidstra and Rick Purse, who were here before, are here still.
Thank you, Minister. Will you make an opening statement? Or
perhaps I'll use the opportunity of an opening statement to answer one of the questions from the previous sessions, but it is actually also relevant for this session in relation to the Inclusive Education Support Program, which is, of course, a program for preschools and schools. So this seems to be the sensible format for me to answer the question the Shadow Minister asked about who was on the current Inclusive Education Support Program statewide centralised panel. Now, the chair is Linley Page, who is an Assistant Director of State and National Reform. The members of the panel include 3 senior psychologists, 3 senior speech pathologists, 1 complex needs health senior advisor, 1 complex behaviours expert one complex behaviours expert educator advisor, 1 sensory needs expert educator, 1 early years disability senior advisor, 3 IESP senior advisors, 1 being, I'm advised, Kathy Clark, who is the manager of this team, 8 what is described as SSS, and then in brackets special educators / behaviour support coaches / team managers, all of whom I'm advised are highly experienced educators with recent knowledge and experience working with sites and or directly with LETs. Representation includes country locations across 5 channels, i.e. 2 staff members for Port Augusta, Whyalla, Flinders Park, 2 staff members from Mount Barker / Mount Gambier / Felixstowe, 1 staff member in Noarlunga and Port Lincoln, 2 staff members in Gawler, Para Hills and Berry, 1 staff member Port Pirie and Kadina, and there is also apparently a non-voting member from Finance and Funding. From Term 4, the panel will also include a preschool representative from either the Preschool Directors Association Executive or a nomination from them, a primary school representative either from the South Australian Primary Principals Association or a nomination thereof, a secondary school representative either from the Secondary Schools Principals Association or a nomination thereof, and 1 from SASEPLA. And I think that answers the question.
Member for Port Adelaide.
Thank you. I thank the people who've joined the Minister to provide advice. My first question comes from Budget Paper 5, page 28 and 29. And it's just to confirm that there are no initiatives in this budget for early childhood.
Well, the member can. So the member's looking at budget initiatives, which this Budget Paper 5 is obviously one where things of a certain scale involving financial changes between Treasury and the agency are able to be identified. However, Budget Paper 5 doesn't tend to deal with matters where the work of departments continues. So, of course, while the initiatives that are outlined in those budget papers relate to other matters, there are, of course, an ongoing ranges of work that are always underway within the department. We're always looking to improve the work we do. I remember last year, was it last year, when we were in my office in this building with Iram Siraj from the UK, who was out here working with our preschools and the department in what will eventually assist us to go to the next stage of our improvement strategy across the department. We want to support our preschools to do that. We're also constantly engaged with our Preschool Directors Association. The department is always on a cycle of constant improvement, but in terms of new funding lines, we're working within our resources. And of course, there are also a range of engagements we're undertaking with non-government organisations, some of which were talked about last year, and hopefully we'll get the chance to talk about a bit more today.
Okay. Turning back one page to page 27, we've identified that there are savings tasks, a saving task of some 48 million for the department. Can the Minister rule out any of that 48 million affecting early childhood program, the early childhood program?
Well, I mean, I've already identified one of the measures that's undertaken is harvesting, and that is in scope for all areas, including early childhood. I think that what I said in my previous answer in the last session would apply in this session as well. And so I direct the member to my previous answer. We still have a substantial saving which from the cost of the Minister's office, which is helping the department as a whole.
Excuse me.
Minister, same section. What role do you think local community-led collaborative efforts of community members, community organisations, education and other government agencies, philanthropy and business can play in early childhood wellbeing?
A very substantial role. The members identified a large diversity of potential stakeholders in the area, and obviously where people are supporting our children, whether it be in government or non-government organisations. We are grateful for that effort, and so I suspect the member's coming to another question which I imagine may be a bit more pointed, so I'll let her do so.
So, thank you, Minister. What is your view also of co-investment by other organisations, private, public and philanthropic, in local place-based efforts focused on early childhood wellbeing and development?
Well, it sort of sounds like a broad question and a very narrow question all at once. Can I say that conceptually, I mean, we're obviously open to it. We've established 4 Clontarf academies across South Australia in our schools that identify resources from our state government, from the Commonwealth Government, from philanthropy. And there are, of course, engagements with non-government organisations in some of the work that we're doing in early childhood as well. You know, I think that answers the question.
Yep. Thank you, Minister. Given that, why did you discontinue education funding for the efforts of Together SA and for community-led collective impact initiatives focused and very successfully focusing on early childhood development and wellbeing, focusing in areas of our state that desperately needed change in that area?
So the point that the member is making is that the program supported by the previous government is the only one capable of delivering an outcome, and I
well, it wasn't just
challenge
supported
that
by
assumption. Let me ask some
It wasn't
advice.
just supported by government, it was also supported by...
Order. The Minister has said that he will seek advice. I know the member Raynell is new to this committee, but it's been very orderly this morning, and it will continue like this all day.
Sought advice from the Acting Executive Director, from the Chief Operating Officer and the Director of Early Childhood Services. None of them immediately recall the program that is the member might be referring to having been supported by early years from the Department for Education. So if there was a particular program over particular years, you know, we're happy to explore the detail of what that program was involved and provide further information as necessary. If there was a program from early years in the Education Department, then we'll get back to the House and the committee.
Thank you. And Minister, what other programs and initiatives with a specific focus on early childhood development and wellbeing contribute to the more than $2 million cut to grant and subsidies? And that is going, sorry, to page 172.
page up because...
That's it, that'll be it, and I've got a little bit. Thank you.
172.
All right, so I can help you with this. If you have a look on page 172, you've got it right in front of you, you'll notice that the 2017-18 actual figure is $7.299 million. The 2018-19 actual figure, budget figure, was 11,327, and the 2019-20 budget is 9,262. So it goes from 7 to 11 to 9.
Yep.
And the advice I have is that the main variance is this one. This is, yeah, it relates to carryovers the department has yet to have approved. So effectively, as I understand it, there was some money that was supposed to be spent in 2017-18 that didn't get spent in that year, that got spent in the 2018-19 year. Which made the 2018-19 year have a higher expense than would otherwise have been the case, and then we're back to normal in 2019-20. So, in effect, the intent was in the order of $9 million in all 3 years.
Thank you.
My question is budget paper for volume 1, page 167. We started to have this conversation in the schools education section before the break about the staff who've been transferred to the Department for Human Services, and I appreciate that the Minister read some detail, which means that I don't need to ask as many questions. Can the Minister tell me how many of the 231 and the 199.8 staff, FTE, come from early childhood?
I will add that detail to the question that we took on notice in the earlier session.
The Minister referred before the break to an MOU that's yet to be finalised and therefore will presumably contain some of the answers. But what position has the Minister taken in the guarantees that are required by education on the kind of service delivery and on the guarantee of not diminishing resources in the discussions with the Human Services Department? What have you sought from entering into those negotiations in losing what is a quite considerable number of staff from the department?
What does this mean? So we're not transferring the money until the memorandum of agreement is entered into. And it's worth understanding the context in which this is arisen as well, is that there is the Early Intervention Research Directorate, which was established under the former government but hadn't really started to fully do its work before the election. I think it was quite late in the piece when it was established, has driven a lot of these recommendations. And of course, the person heading up this new unit is reasonably familiar with the needs of schools, and particularly the early childhood settings in education, because it's Anne-Marie Hayes, who until quite recently was the Executive Director for Early Childhood within the Education Department. So I think it's more than fair to say that she is acutely aware of what the Department for Education's expectations are going to be going forward.
Can you rule out that the resourcing, having been transferred in the future to the Department for Human Services, might be used for other purposes than it is currently being used?
Well, I'd refer to the members of my previous answer, in which I make it pretty clear this will be sorted out under the MOA.
Will you seek to have that ruled out, Minister?
I'm saying that we'll be establishing our expectations in the MOA.
Mr. Chair, my question is in regards to budget paper 4, volume 1, page 171, the highlight section at bullet point 3. Minister, can you describe for the committee how the Inclusive Education Support Program for preschools assists children with disabilities in South Australia?
Yes, thank you. I thank the member for Colton for the question, and I think the Inclusive Education Support Program, this is an important reform for the whole education department in ensuring that we best meet the needs of our students with disability and indeed for our schools and preschools across South Australia. But I think once it's fully established, it's our preschools that are going to benefit most substantially, or as substantially, but they're certainly going to feel the benefits of this program once it's fully rolled out. It's a simpler approach to supporting mainstream preschool and school students with a disability. It's aimed at reducing red tape to ensure funding transparency, to provide resourcing certainty. This will lead to more timely and flexible strategies to support children and students to achieve and excel in their learning. So the new Inclusive Education Support Program commenced at the start of 2019 with an expanded range of new criteria which align with the nationally consistent collection of data on school students with disability. Funding supports for children and students with complex social and emotional, behaviour and healthcare needs now included in the program. And for the first time, preschools have received an IESP, Inclusive Education Support Program grant, similar to schools. This means that preschool children requiring minor adjustments to their learning program do not have to be assessed or apply for the funding. It allows preschool leaders to identify their needs, to plan and employ staff for longer contracts due to a greater certainty of funding. They're not necessarily waiting around for months and months and months, waiting for the expert to come and assess the person, which, bearing in mind when a lot of students are at the preschool for a year, that can be an extraordinarily challenge for the preschool because, of course, as you get an assessment, not long after that the child leaves again. We're now able to give some certainty to preschools about their funding. So assessments will only be required for a small number of children requiring adjustments at the extensive level. And can I say that the program also, part of its key focus, and why reducing red tape sounds like a great slogan, but it's really important in this area because reducing red tape means getting an intervention, getting an assessment and therefore an intervention much earlier because the people doing the assessments will not have to do as many assessments. If the lower level ones, you can be guaranteed the funding without an assessment. The new model also ensures that preschool children receiving extensive adjustments in the preschool setting can transition to school with the same or higher level of funding, which is another important part of the program because it's those transitions, whether it's between schools or between preschool and school, that are sometimes the places where the system finds it harder to work with because a person has a relationship with a preschool or have a relationship with the school where their child goes. But a relationship with the system is a little bit further removed. So ensuring that some of the supports in the system can follow a student from preschool to school is going to be a significant benefit to those students. So in Term 3, preschools as well as schools and special option sites will be trained in the use of the new online application form, which will also hopefully make it much easier, and the new form and process will be implemented from Term 4 2019. So far, across preschools and schools, 31,000 students have been transitioned to the new model in 2019. We talked earlier about the feedback session where we looked at what the challenges are and we're looking to address those, but overwhelmingly the information that we've been provided has been positive from the sites and we think it'll get more positive as people become more familiar with the new program. And certainly we're looking to hold further feedback sessions with preschool and school leaders this term. Along with that training for the use of the new online application forms. We're very excited about what this IESP program will be able to do to support our schools and preschools better, and most importantly our students, including the very young ones in preschools who are with the disability.
Page 171, where we start talking about Early Childhood Development Program. There's a reference to the Bilingual Playgroup Program. Is that a federally funded program, or is that now being funded by the state?
Just give us a moment because I'm fairly sure that I had some information about this. We'll check. I want to make sure we're absolutely accurate in the information we provide, so I'll take that on notice.
No problem. Now, the larger issue of universal access, the 15 hours, what's the status of that for the federal government making its contribution? How many years ahead are we certain that we will have it?
So we have that guaranteed until the end of next year, and I think it's fair to say that the Federal Education Minister is well and truly aware of my views and the views of other state ministers on the desirability of having a long-term arrangement settled.
Why do you
And
think?
that is,
Sorry.
and I think we're working towards that. There is, as a result of the Commonwealth Government's election commitments, a process which Education Council is now working with that looks at the way that, of course, these things are funded. One of the challenges in this area is that the funding arrangements in practice end up being quite different from state to state. Some states, such as South Australia, have a very high level of high number of service providers that are government preschools. I think in Queensland, Good Start, which is a sort of non-government company provider type model, community type model, but a very large one. From memory is, if not the main provider, certainly one of the main providers. In other states, we're talking about councils or, and indeed in South Australia, a lot of the early childhood education programs, the kindy programs, are increasingly being organised in non-government schools or in long daycare services that are also offering kindy. But the ratio from state to state or territory is quite different from each other. And so one of the things that the Commonwealth's review of how this works is going to look at is making sure that any long-term national partnership is done fairly, and I think that's a laudable goal. That said, having a commitment to the Commonwealth contribution to 15 hours is utterly desirable, and while the Commonwealth is the ones we're asking for the money from, and they are expecting that we're going to have this review first, and so we're having the review, we'll support the review. We'll, as an Education Council, I think all the states and territories are as eager to get as good a review done as quickly as possible, so that we can then move on to, you know, the good bit where we get the money locked in. That is the work that we're doing, and I think that it's one where all of the states and territories are fairly consistent in our purpose that we want to lock that away.
Okay. Still on page 171, at our last estimates, we talked about the question of preschool for 3-year-olds, universal preschool for 3-year-olds, and we discussed the fact that Lifting Our Game had been, at that point, fairly recently delivered to the Education Council. I wonder if the Minister has had time to form a position about the desirability or otherwise of 3-year-old preschool being universally offered.
Well, obviously, there are experts in the area who have fairly strong views on both sides of this case, I've got to say. There are, at the moment, as the member is aware, provisions for Aboriginal students and children under the guardianship of the Child Protection Department to be able to access preschool at the age of 3 right now, and that's actually really important. I think that the advice I've received and the research that I've read, as I understand it, is pretty unanimous in suggesting that for those cohorts and potentially for some other vulnerable cohorts where that need isn't currently met, there is an advantage for those 3-year-olds to be in preschool. But in terms of getting the best bang for our buck in supporting our early childhood areas, there are a number of people who have different views. I think the Preschool Directors Association is one that identifies a range of challenges as well with this suggestion. So we're not looking towards universal access for 3-year-olds at this stage under the model that is available for 4-year-olds. But I'm quite open-minded about there being a longer-term discussion, and it's one of the things I'm sure will happen at the Education Council about how we best meet the particular needs of our vulnerable cohorts.
Can the Minister direct me to any research that indicates that offering, clearly not compulsory, but offering 3-year-old preschool universally has some negative impacts on students and on children?
Well, look, the member can characterise the reflection I made about people who have advised in whatever way she likes. At the end of the day, I'm identifying that there are people who are experts in the field who have suggested that the focus should be on meeting our vulnerable cohorts and providing universal access. In fact, one person said to me, and I don't recollect who, but the point that they were making was that if you provide universal access without the requisite infrastructure in place, for example, the first people who are going to take up the opportunity are not going to be the vulnerable cohorts that we are so focused on targeting. So we do need to make sure that we get the best bang for our buck when we're supporting young, vulnerable South Australians, and that's going to be my focus.
Has the Minister had much consideration of the peer effect of not having children only learning in the environment with other very vulnerable children, that having vulnerable children with more diverse socioeconomic and advantaged background is beneficial, as the Minister turned his mind to that.
I think that it's quite enjoyable to get into a bit of a more philosophical discussion. I'm happy to do so. But I think the cause doesn't necessarily follow the effect that the outcome that the member is suggesting. I think that at the moment you have vulnerable cohorts. You have 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, and they're in certain environments, children's centres, preschools potentially, long daycare services with early childhood options. Are they going to be the ones that would immediately benefit from having more 3-year-olds come in who don't fit into those vulnerable cohorts? Depends what children's centre they're in. I mean, it may well be a situation where the children who are in those vulnerable cohorts will continue to attend the services that are full. I think the member might remember there was some discussion when the Federal Labor Party was suggesting that a move towards 3-year-olds having access to preschool. I don't think the Federal Labor Party was ever suggesting they would pay for it other than the 3 hours a week, although I stand to be corrected. I certainly am advised they weren't suggesting that they would pay for the infrastructure that would be needed to cater for the large number of other students. And the point I was making is without the infrastructure, then you would find that the first cohorts to take up that opportunity, I would suggest, aren't necessarily the cohorts you're seeking to assist.
Minister, on page 171, in relation to funding for community organisations for literacy and numeracy programs, can you please detail which organisations are receiving funding, how much funding, and what methodology you'll use to evaluate those programs and that funding?
It's almost as if it was a question that could have been asked by any member of this committee, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to answer this question because it's some terrific news. The government is indeed progressing with delivering evidence-based literacy and numeracy programs targeted at disadvantaged children in the early years before they get to school. Now, we've got agreements in place with I've actually got a feeling there's one that's not listed here as well that the department might consider looking at as well, but I'm pretty sure that I gave a grant to an organisation to do some of this work fairly recently as well. But in addition to that, I can advise the committee right now about Raising Literacy Australia, who are being supported for the Little Big Book Club, and the Smith family to deliver their Let's Read and Let's Count programs across government and non-government early learning settings. Last year we agreed to support Raising Literacy Australia with $1.52 million, excluding GST, over 5 years to the 30th of June 2023, to provide baby, toddler and preschool reading packs to South Australian families. We also support the Read to Me project, which is Raising Literacy Australia's project as well, which supports children in out-of-home care. That program has just received an extension to its agreement, which had been set to expire last month. Now, the reading packs aim to develop early childhood reading and literacy skills by encouraging and supporting parents and caregivers to read regularly to their children from an early age. The Read to Me project, which is the second one I outlined, provides a reading pack and user's guide for carers and residential care staff targeted to children up to preschool age under the guardianship of the Minister. Now, the Smith family will also receive $720,000 excluding GST over 3 years to deliver their Let's Read and Let's Count programs into disadvantaged communities, including the Smith family Learning for Life communities within the cities of Onkaparinga, Port Adelaide, Playford, Salisbury, Port Augusta and Whyalla. The Department for Education also provides services for families with young children which focus on healthy child development, including literacy and numeracy development, through the Early Years Learning Framework, which guides early childhood educators in developing quality early childhood education programs, the Children's Centres, and indeed the Learning Together programs that are delivered throughout the state. Learning Together operates within existing departmental services and works with parents to plan for and support children's learning. And as I say, I'm fairly sure there's another NGO that we've provided a smaller amount of support for, United Way, as well.
Yeah. How will you, Minister, how will you measure the impact of the programs that you've funded?
Well, the department obviously is keeping an eye on all of the programs that they run out. There's the funding agreements with non-government organisations always have a range of KPIs as appropriate to their funding agreements.
And how will you measure the impact of the child and family intensive support system? Specifically, what methodology will you use to measure the impact?
The member asks about specific methodology. I think to be safe, I'll take that on notice.
Okay. And probably if you're taking it on notice, that's fine. But if you can explore in that question on notice, exactly what methodology you will use to ensure that the application of the program has a positive impact on children's wellbeing and that it is assisting children to be safe, to be healthy, ready to learn and positively engaging.
I can advise the member.
To your
well, no, I can answer the question. I'm very happy to confirm that the government seeks that the programs we support assist our children's wellbeing, safety and happiness and all those other important things.
But how will you measure their effectiveness, I guess?
I already took that question on notice.
Okay, thank you. And how, in relation to the same project, or relation to the same program, how is community informing and leading the implementation of that program?
Sorry, I'm going to have to take that on notice.
Okay. Thank you.
If I can now do the omnibus so that I don't miss out on doing the omnibus, and then we can come back to other comments. Number one, for each department and agency reporting to the Minister, what is the actual FTE count at June 30, 2019 and the projected actual FTE count for each year of the forward estimates? What is the total employment cost for each year of the forward estimates? What is the notional FTE job reduction target that has been agreed with Treasury for each year of the forward estimates? And does the agency or department expect to meet the target in each year of the forward estimates? How many TVSPs are estimated to be required to meet the FTE reductions over the forward estimates? 2. Between 1 July 2018 and 30 June 2019, will the Minister list the job title and total employment cost of each position, with a total estimated cost of $100,000 or more, which has either 1 been abolished or which 2 has been created? 3. Will the Minister provide a detailed breakdown of expenditure on consultants and contractors above $10,000 between 1 July 2018 and 30 June 2019 for all departments and agencies reporting to the Minister, listing the name of the consultant, contractor or service supplier, cost, work undertaken, reason for engaging the contractor and method of appointment? 4. Will the Minister provide a detailed breakdown of forecast expenditure on consultants and contractors above $10,000 between 1 July 2019 and 30 June 2020 for all departments and agencies reporting to the Minister, listing the name of the consultant, contractor or service supplier, cost, work undertaken, reason for engaging the contractor and method of appointment? 5. For each department and agency for which the Minister has responsibility, how many FTEs were employed to provide communication and promotion activities in 2018-19 and what was their employment expense? How many FTEs are budgeted to provide communication and promotion activities in 2019-20, 2020-21 and 21-22, 22-23? And what is their estimated employment expense? The total cost of government-paid advertising, including campaigns across all mediums, in 2017-18 and budgeted cost for 2018-19. 6. For each department and agency reporting to the Minister, please provide a full itemised breakdown of attraction and retention allowances as well as non-salary benefits paid to public servants and contracts between 1 July 2018 and 30 June 2019. 7. What is the title and total employment cost of each individual staff member in the Minister's office as at 30 June 2019, including all departmental employees seconded to the ministerial office? 8. For each department and agency reporting to the Minister, could you detail how much was spent on targeted voluntary separation packages in 18-19? What department funded these TVSPs? What number of TVSPs were funded? What is the budget for targeted voluntary separation packages for financial years included in the forward estimates by year? And how are these packages funded? What is the breakdown per agency branch of targeted voluntary separation packages for financial years included in the forward estimates by year by FTE? 9. For each department and agency reporting to the Minister, how many executive terminations have occurred since 1 July 2018 and what is the value of executive termination payments made. 10, for each department and agency reporting to the Minister, what new executive appointments have been made since 1 July 2018 and what is the annual salary and total employment cost for each position. 11, for each department and agency reporting to the Minister, how many employees have been declared excess, how long has each employee been declared excess and what is the salary of each excess employee. 12, for the 2018-19 financial year, for all departments and agencies reporting to the Minister, what underspending on operating programs 1 was and 2 was not approved by Cabinet for carryover expenditure in 2019-20. 13, for the 18-19 financial year, for all departments and agencies reporting to the Minister, what underspending on investing or capital projects or programs 1 was and 2 was not approved by Cabinet for carryover expenditure in 1920, how much was sought and how much was approved. For each grant program or fund the Minister is responsible. 14, for each grant program or fund the Minister is responsible for, please provide the following information for 2018-19, 19-20, 2021 and 21-22 financial years. Name of program and fund, the purpose of the program or fund, balance of the grant program or fund, budgeted or actual expenditure from the program or fund, budgeted or actual payments into the program or fund, carryovers into or from the program or fund, and details including the value and beneficiary of any commitments already made to be funded from the program or fund. 15, for the period of 1 July 2018 to 30 June 2019, provide a breakdown of all grants paid by the department agency that report to the Minister, including when the payment was made to the recipient and when the grant agreement was signed by both parties. 16, for each year of the forward estimates, please provide the name and budgeted expenditure across the 1920, 2021, 21-22 and 22-23 financial years for each individual investing expenditure project administered by or on behalf of all of the departments and agencies reporting to the Minister. 17, for each year of the forward estimates, please provide the name and budget for each individual program administered by or on behalf of all departments and agencies reporting to the Minister. 18, for each department and agency reporting to the Minister, what is the total cost of machinery of government changes since 1 July 2018, and please provide a breakdown of these costs. 19, for each department and agency reporting to the Minister, what new sections of your department or agency have been established since 1 July 2018 and what is their purpose. And 20, for each department and agency reporting to the Minister, what savings targets have been set for each year of the forward estimates, what measures are you implementing to meet your savings target, and what is the estimated FTE impact of these measures. So if I could
I'm
now
glad you asked.
turn to here's something I prepared earlier. Can I turn to page 173 of Budget Paper 4, Volume 1?
Those last ones on notice?
I would. I apologise for not allowing you to do that, Minister. Go ahead.
I thought it would be a kindness if I make sure that we do that, so I will take them on notice. And
Excellent.
I'll bring back appropriate
I
information
would have been in
at the
trouble had you
appropriate
not. On page 173, I note that there are 4 preschools that are expected not to be in existence next year. In answering the question, if the answer is that they have been moved on site of a school rather than simply closed and not moved, I'd like to know about the reporting arrangements, whether the director remains in charge or whether the principal has taken over.
So I can advise that the decrease in 4 preschool services is due to 1 preschool service being closed and 3 being suspended in 2019, and the East Murray School was closed at the end of 2018 after consultation with the local community about declining enrolments. As a result of the school's closure, the East Murray school-based preschool was also closed. So that was something that I think had been coming for some time. That was an R to 12 school, from a preschool to 12 school, and it had a very, very small number of students who are now attending a couple of other not too distant schools. I think they had 1 SACE graduate last year from recollection, but I stand to be corrected. Anyway, their preschool closed. That was the one that closed. Robertstown Preschool, the Kenmore Park Preschool and the Oodnadatta Preschool were suspended for 2019 as there were no projected enrolments of children for Term 1 2019. That is the advice that I've received.
Thank you. Also on that page, I see that there's an increase in cost per child in occasional care from $832 to $1,270. Can the Minister briefly explain why that is?
I'll endeavour to do so. But potentially, hang on. Yes, no, I will endeavour to do so, but not today. I'll take that on notice and bring back an answer to the member.
I note a little bit further down that there's a drop in the number of children in daycare, in family daycare. It notes the number of registered children in family daycare continues to decline, consistent with the national trend. And I wonder if the Minister has any advice about why that is occurring.
The information I have doesn't address that particular point, so I will again take that one on notice and bring back some advice.
As part of that, I'd be interested to know if there's evidence that the children are going to another service provider of some sort, or whether they're more likely to be staying at home. It might be hard to track, but I would be interested to know
I will
that level of
happily
detail.
incorporate that addendum to the earlier question taken on notice.
Thank you. I also have a question about the attendance and enrolment at preschool services, and I believe the Minister touched on this earlier, but I'd like, if he has the opportunity to flesh it out. There's been a question, because South Australia has so many young people who go to preschool in government services, but many of them are also attending long day care, and they may well pick up some of their hours at their long day care when they're there for that day anyway. I believe in the past it was quite difficult to match up so that it looked like students might not be attending preschool, and in fact they were attending it just at a different service. It looked like they were missing for the half day. Has there been any progress in being able to track students so that we're more accurately reflecting whether they're getting their full 15 hours but perhaps across two services?
Right, so we're continuing to work with the Commonwealth and work with them to get advice from their data sets about that might help us deal with that. Can I also identify, I've got some information in relation to the declining number of children enrolled. So the 2018-19 projection was 17,800 and the 2018-19 estimated result is 17,491, which is in line with the budget line the members just identified.
Yes.
So interestingly, the ABS population projections data indicate a slight decrease in the South Australian population of children eligible for preschool in 2019. Forecasts a drop of between 76 and 83 children, and the decreasing enrolment numbers in government and non-government preschool services funded by the state government are being offset by an increase in enrolments in universal access per capita funded non-government preschool programs, which I think is basically what the member just said. And the total number of enrolments across these three sectors is 20,000 children.
Okay, thank you. And as I seem to have time for one more question, can we return to page 167? We were having the conversation about the staff that have been moved to Human Services and the ongoing discussion. Can the Minister inform me where CAFS now sits and where the Universal Home Visit sits? Are they reporting to health, to education, or to this new entity?
I think it goes to it. Oh, okay. Can I get you to? Yeah, no, I might actually ask the Chief Executive to reflect and we'll see how it goes.
No pressure.
No pressure
You've
at
got
all.
30
Thank
seconds.
you. Thank you, Minister. So CAFS remains in health and always did under the previous arrangements, as you recall, Shadow Minister. So that continues, and now the agreement that we had operated with health will now have to be reset with DHS.
Right.
So
the agreement that existed with the Education Department will now exist with the...
that's our understanding. Yep.
Okay, thank you.